our meeting, and we will move directly into a continuation of the public hearing for CU-1-18 and CU-2-18 regarding the Titan well pad on 6189 Bollinger Road.
He's going to need a chair.
Chair up there.
Okay. All right.
There. Thank you.
Jamie's leaving, Jim.
Jim.
Jamie's leaving.
Oh, is she? Okay.
I could have asked this library insurance. Municipalities.
Can I come? Can I come? Come on. Okay.
Yeah.
I think so. I'm hooked up.
You all mic'd up?
Thanks.
So with that, we will proceed with the hearing. The applicant may continue.
Thank you. Good evening. Again, my name is Pierce Richardson. I'm an attorney with the K&L Gates firm, here representing the applicant HHEX on the two conditional use applications. We hope to complete our presentation to you this evening on the applications. We've got 3 witnesses to present to you. 2 will discuss traffic issues, and the 3rd will address some remaining issues relating to the application. So with that,
Mr. Richardson, again, I just, to those in the audience, even though the applicant may finish its case tonight, it's then, PT will then present its case. So again, if there's going to be any public comment, it will not be tonight. So we'll get a better idea from Mr. Hamilton, I think, of PT's presentation, but just to let everybody know for your schedule's sake that we're not going to get into any public comment again. Thank you, Mr. Richardson.
thank you, Mr. Sig. Our first witness this evening is Manny Johnson. Manny, state your full name for the record, please. Oh, yeah, why don't we swear all 3? Yeah, let's do that, sure.
Yes, ma'am.
Can you state your full name for the record, please?
It's Manuel Johnson. I go by Manny, M-A-N-N-Y, Johnson, J-O-H-N-S-O-M.
And what is your position with HHEX?
The operations manager.
And what is your role with respect to the Titan Well Pad project?
So I provide feedback to the various engineering firms and contractors, and then also I oversee the operations of the location.
And Manny, can you describe for council your educational background?
So I have a degree in petroleum and natural gas engineering.
And what is your experience in the field?
So I have over 10 years of oil and gas experience, strictly in the Appalachian Basin. I've worked in West Virginia, Pennsylvania, and Ohio.
And what was your role in preparation of the conditional use application?
Just providing operational expertise on the various parts of the project.
What is your role anticipated to be with the project moving forward if it's approved?
So as the operations manager, I'm involved in everything from the completion to the long-term production of the well and ensuring the safety of the operations.
And getting into the traffic discussion, can you review for council the proposed haul route for the project? We can get that up on the screen. And just for council's benefit, this has already been introduced as tab 7A to our Exhibit 1.
So our proposed haul route is coming off 66 onto Silvis Road, then onto 4051 Hilty Road, then making a left onto Bollinger Road. And our location is approximately right there.
Can you describe for council the type of trucks that HEX anticipates throughout the project?
Yes, I'll just kind of give a general overview of the type of trucks that will come in for the various sections of our operations. And then SSC will have the more specific numbers to go over.
SSE is a traffic consultant. He'll testify next.
Yep, thank you. For construction, when we start to build the location, we'll have pickup trucks, and then we'll have our excavation equipment that will come in, and then we'll have rock trucks that will also come in to stone the location. During our drilling process, we'll have the trucks that will come to cement the well, semi-trucks that will bring the pipe into location there, and then also the rig itself will mobilize it in also. And then in the completions up phase of our operations, we'll have the sand trucks that will be present through the fracturing phase, and then we'll have our pickup trucks, and then also various semi-trailers with pipe, and then also our workover rig as well. And then for our production phase, which this is the long-term portion of the project there, is you will have water trucks that will periodically come in to remove the produced water, and then periodically a pickup truck during that period.
So those first three stages you described, those are essentially all having to do with the initial development of the well.
Yes, sir.
Zoning ordinance 220-31 CC 8A imposes a number of traffic control requirements that HEX must abide by. I'd like to discuss those with you. The first is, how was the haul route designed to minimize the project's impact on streets in the municipality?
So working with SSE, we look at the route in, and what we try to do is find where the main state roads are, and then also try to look at the shortest distance to the location to lessen the impact on the community there. And then some of the limiting factors you may run into from time to time, obviously, is your turning radiuses coming from some of the different directions, and just how some of the alignment may work with the road. So this was the best route in, working with SSC and the team there.
And how does HEX work with school districts with respect to bus stops and bus routes?
So with the bus stops, before our operations begin, we meet, or we speak with the school district, and we develop, well, what time are your buses coming through those areas? And what we do is we avoid sending our large traffic through those particular time periods. For example, we did talk with Kiski School District there, and they've identified following pickup and drop-off times, so like 6:40 a.m. to 7 a.m., and then 7:50 to 8:05, and then also 3:10, 3:20, 3:55, and 4:05 are the drop-offs in the afternoon. Now, one thing to always keep in mind and experience in the past working with the school districts, times change. Depending on, new children that get added to the route. And so we're very aware of that. So one thing we do is to keep that dialogue going, and especially imminently before our operations begin, we talk with the school district. We let them know what we have going on at that time period. It's worked well.
So that was the Kiski Area School District, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And what other districts did you talk to?
We reached out to Greensburg, Salem School District, Franklin Regional School District as well.
And what were the results of those conversations?
Kiski was the only one that identified stops. Franklin Regional does have buses along the proposed haul route, but did not give any time windows and did not provide any information on specific stops. So we would reach out to them again just to make sure that hasn't changed before our operations there. And, of course, Greensburg, Salem did not have any during those time periods.
And the next requirement is, how does HEX ensure the safety of people in areas that are established for road crossings or are adjacent to roadways?
So to this question, there's a multitude of things that we do here. So one is, and as some have seen, we recommend some road upgrades that will take place. Also, we, will provide a convoy plan that we'll get to here later in the presentation. And then also, if there is a situation where flaggers would be needed, we do place those. But our intent is to keep traffic flowing at all times.
And then this would also include the efforts you just described to coordinate with school districts and avoid heavy
Yes, sir.
traffic during those times. Okay. And does HEX anticipate entering into a roadway maintenance and repair agreement with the municipality?
Yes, sir.
And does HEX intend to stage trucks or equipment on local roads?
No, sir.
Other witnesses have testified to the access driveway that'll provide access to the site. Is that going to be gated with an address clearly marked?
Yeah. So part of your DEP requirements is to have a clear signage of the location with the coordinates accompanying that. And then also we will have during our initial phase of our completion, our drilling phase, we maintain a 24-hour gate out there, whether it's robotic or manned. And then also, once we get into the production phase, we install a permanent pipe gate there as well. And one of the things that is always important to do, and I've seen some folks make even mistakes in the past, but is moving that gate up the road just enough so that the semi-trucks or if a pickup truck can get off the road safely and be off the road so nobody's staged out on the road as well for the long-term production.
The final specific requirement relating to traffic is whether diesel-powered motors or motor vehicles will be idled.
No, they will not be idling off the location there, sir.
You mentioned that one of the safety features that HEX incorporates in its operations is to convoy trucks when that makes sense over the haul route. Can you describe what drives that decision and how that will work?
So with regards to this haul route, and as the team and in conversations with Stahl Schaefer, one of the things that we're recommending and want to do is to develop a convoy plan for this haul route. So what we would do is obtain a staging area off of 66 there. And with that, we would move, say, our sand trucks in 3 at a time with a pilot vehicle in front of that. And then that way, if there is, for some reason, traffic, on the road, something that would say, hey, we need to slow down, that pilot vehicle is out in front. And then it would, of course, we use a predetermined CB channel that all the truck drivers would use, and we actually will label that out there on our signage for our haul route that will say, hey, you need to use such and such CB channel. And the pilot vehicle would then communicate with the staging area, or we would also notify particular call-out areas, hey, here's where our semi-truck traffic is. And what that allows us to do is gives us the opportunity to get out in front far enough, but then also keep from backing up or slowing the traffic with the convoy plan there. So we wouldn't put, say, multiple convoys just backing up the road. We'd let one convoy move through, get them unloaded, and then get them out. So those are some of the things that we do in regards, especially to this type of haul route. There's some narrow sections that do exist here. So we try to be very mindful of those and communicate back to the staging area, hey, we've got a passenger vehicle coming through here, or we've got this, farmer, there's a couple farms out through there. He's got a tractor coming out the road. We can communicate that out with the convoy team there.
And what happens if there's unplanned stop along the way, something unforeseen occurs?
Say, for example, you have a vehicle that gets disabled. At that point, we're going to notify back to the staging area. If need be, we'd obviously let the local law enforcement know if we had a disabled vehicle that was backing up the traffic there, because that's one thing you don't want to do is, hey, we do have an issue out here. We want to make sure we're transparent. People know, hey, we're stopped up, and we'd let the local law enforcement know. That's worked well in the past for us, too, working with the police.
And how does HEX handle potential complaints regarding use of roads or traffic?
So in regards to complaints, I'll give a general overview, and then Ms. Jennifer will give more specific. But especially in regards to traffic, if one comes in, we address it immediately, if it's a particular vendor. So one thing with our security out there, we know who's coming on and off location, and that allows us to address any issues specifically if there is, a driver, a complaint that needs to be addressed. So that's kind of how we've handled those.
And how do you handle potential maintenance issues relating to the state and local roads that you intend to use?
So for, issues in regards to the road, obviously we have the excess maintenance agreement. We have to abide by that. We also have a section of PennDOT road that exists there, so we'll have to work with the local PennDOT folks as well. And normally, we're try to be as proactive if we do have a road that's deteriorating. We'll call them up and say, hey, we need to fix this section here. Here's what we're doing. We try to avoid getting the 5-7 day letters from PennDOT to the best of our ability there, but normally we address them as they come.
Okay, can you give some examples of how you've addressed, specific issues on other projects with municipalities?
So one thing I did want to display is just a couple of our recent projects that we have completed. So this project here was in the Allegheny Township, and we had a location that we constructed out there, and the road was in very poor shape from the start. So what we did was we came in early, and with all the alligator cracking, and then some of even the sides were starting to bust up, we went ahead and did, we chewed that up and did a full overlay through that section of road there. Just a couple other examples here. We also worked with the township as well. They actually had the inlet drains that existed, in the road itself. So we had to work around them, help get them to the right elevation as well. And then we also work on the shoulders also when we do a project like this. But this one was in Allegheny Township. Here's another section of Allegheny Township as well. You can kind of see on the sides here where we did reinforce some of the shoulders. The other thing I wanted to point out too, we do work with the various landowners when it comes to the apron into their property there. And then with this particular section, we actually did do a widening here to ensure that we could make the turn up onto this road. I bring this picture up here. So one thing that does happen from time to time when you put a new road down, obviously your road is less impervious, right? So what we did have here, we had a particular landowner, and the water was actually moving off the road and was accumulating, more into his driveway. So we installed obviously a drain here. And this worked out really well for that landowner there. So we do take, obviously, if there is an issue, we will correct it. And just another example here, just of our work that we did here last year. And then here's kind of a more farther view of the driveway improvement that we did for this landowner. Along this road where we did the improvement. This is also just another example. Kind of angle that just a little bit differently there. See a little bit better. But sometimes most of the road may be in very good shape, and we'll do what we call a mill and fill at this point. We do patchwork as well and base repair work, depending on what's going on with the road. Again, another example where we went through and did repairs during and after our operations. And one thing I did want to show the group as well is with this particular project here, This one was in Upper Burrell. And just to show you a picture, we do put signage out that shows where our, what the haul route is. We also put, on the haul route, well, not the non-haul route, we have to place signage out there that says, hey, this is not a HEX haul route. One of the issues you run into from time to time is folks like to just put their GPS in and then just go. So we're pretty vigilant when it comes to making sure we've got proper signage out there, and even in our procedures, we do not place GPS coordinates in them. We only give the drivers the haul routes here. The other thing I want to point out here, and I'd be able to let me get this kind of where it's a little better picture. But let's see if you guys can get both of that. So with this, when we first started this project to come into this location in Upper Burrell, we had a large culvert, and all that was over top of it was just a little bit of fill that existed there, and we did not feel like it was safe for our large traffic trucks to come through there. So what we did do is we installed a bridge over top of this. I just want to kind of show you, it's we asphalt right to it, and it's worked out really well for the community and for our operations there. So that is something that we do is if we need to upgrade a bridge for a temporary time frame while our operations are in there, we have done that. And really just got just another couple pictures of the bridge itself that exist here. And obviously there wasn't hardly any room to pass by for vehicles before we got here. And at one point, even working with the township, they allowed us to come in, get the guardrails up, get everything asphalted. So we even coordinated with their roadmaster, and they helped us work with the traffic pattern as we installed this bridge. A nice thing about this feature is, it took just a couple days to get it in. They did a really good job with the work the contractor did. Again, just another example there for you guys to look at.
Great, thanks, Manny. Our traffic expert next is going to speak to the anticipated truck volumes, but in terms of providing some background understanding of where these numbers are being derived, let's talk a little bit more about operations during the well development. So the operations do require water during the completion stage, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. And can you explain the possible ways an operator can obtain water for these operations?
Yeah, so with our completion operations, sometimes water is trucked in, sometimes it's piped in, and then sometimes it's a mixed bag depending on what our quantity we have available via pipe.
And in our initial hearing on June 19th, we introduced a June 18, 2019 letter of intent between HEX and the Municipal Authority of Westmoreland County that confirmed that water is available to service the project via mainline extension along Silvis, Hilty, and Ballinger roads. Could you explain what that means?
So right now we're in obviously the planning phase, so we're not in our final agreement, but we are working together on a project that would supply water via pipe to the Titan location.
So is it HEX's intent to use a water line to provide the majority of the water needs for the project?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Are you able today to commit to doing that?
No, and obviously with the letter of intent and not being in our final phases with it, and then even if the agreement's reached for 100% water to be moved via pipe, obviously those unforeseen circumstances could happen if there's a rupture in the line, if something were to happen with the supply. At that point we wouldn't be able to say, hey, we're 100% piped and would need to truck during that time. And really what that does, if we're not able to truck, it would lengthen our impact to the community. We'd be out there a lot longer if we couldn't do that.
It would stretch out the time needed to complete
Yes, sir.
those operations. The traffic expert is going to talk about anticipated traffic during each stage, but part of that analysis depends on how many hydraulic fracturing stages can be completed in one day. Can you, just as prefacing her testimony, can you explain what is meant by a hydraulic fracturing stage?
Yeah, so once the lateral is drilled and cemented in, you'll hear the word stage used. So a certain interval of that lateral, say 200 foot of that lateral, say it's 8,000 foot, will pump water and into that and fracture that stage. So our efficiencies are based off of how many stages that we can get done in a single day. So a lot of our benchmarks that we go for is, hey, are we getting 4 stages a day? Are we getting 6 stages a day? And what that does, it allows us to say, hey, this is roughly how long it's going to take for us to complete each individual lateral.
Thank you. Any questions from council for this witness?
Manny actually hosted a group, I was with the group over at the Poseidon Well. And a question, were there any violations with respect to traffic at the Poseidon facility?
I cannot answer that 100%, but to my knowledge, Jen, I don't think we had any, sir.
I have a couple questions.
Yes, ma'am.
The route that you outlined for hauling, that is for everything. So water, sand, all the phases you said, all of that, they're all going to go that route,
Yes,
correct?
ma'am.
Okay. And when you have I'm not sure of the phases. I would assume it's the completion phase that you have the most traffic with sand trucks and all of that.
Yes, ma'am.
And I know you said you're going to convoy them 3 at a time. Is that an all-day process?
Yes, ma'am.
All day?
Yep.
24 hours?
Yes,
So
ma'am.
that's also at night, okay. Do you do anything for the community? I know the municipalities are certainly responsible also to communicate to that area, but I know because my daughter lives out that way.
Okay.
Do you do anything like advertise in their papers, beyond the schools, so that the community themselves know what's happening and are prepared for that kind of traffic 24?
Yep. So we do. We've done outreach in the past, and Ms. Jen, our vice president, she'll actually speak to kind of what our outreach is. But yeah, that's definitely within our realm where we have pulled landowners together, get in a meeting hall and explain our operations, and then also with the 24 hours a day with the hauling. The nice thing about being able to go 24 hours is, one, it spreads out the traffic. You have less impact in the nighttime as well. And then what it does do is, you're not running something in there like we're 100% piped via water, and we're just bringing mainly sand in at that point. You're not going to, I want to explain, you're not going to see these masses of convoys just coming in non-stop every minute either. We're going to stage, get our sand unloaded, get them out, and then, sometime we'll run the next group in. So just to kind of try to phrase that up, what that looks like.
Okay. And I know you can't give me an exact, but of that time where you have the most trucks going in with the completion phase, what kind of a time frame are you talking about?
So
Of the whole process, or
Miss,
somebody else can say?
Jen with the road, the specialist, she actually has the breakdown, so you guys will get that question
Thank you.
answered there, ma'am. Yep.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Are you finished, Tony?
Yeah,
Sorry.
thank you.
The estimated round trip time, how long is it going to take for one, say, convoy of 3? What is the round trip of that route?
So normally, pull my route up here. So with this, obviously this is a short haul route for us off of 66. You're moving, up under 25 miles an hour throughout here. So say they're 10 minutes across here. Normally, if we're using, we like to use in the completions a sandbox system And what it does is the truck drivers really never have to actually get out of their truck. So there's a forklift that'll be waiting to unload the box. And as soon as they get pulled up in the area, he'll pick up the sandbox, place it in its place, and then the truck driver is able to trip out pretty quickly. So most times those guys aren't there for more than 10 minutes. So if you're looking at 10 in, 10 on location, and 10 out, that you would run your convoy in. That's rough estimates.
Right.
Don't hold me to the
No,
second.
I understand.
Okay, thank you.
I'll get him back to the convoy. How many trucks do you think will be in one convoy?
So with the convoy itself, and specific to the sand, which is kind of the majority of the traffic, we run 3 sand trucks at a time with 1 escort vehicle in front of it.
That's the most trucks that'll be in that convoy.
Yes,
3 trucks.
yes, sir. Yep. Yeah, we've tried some bigger convoys in the past, and you really can get spread out. So 3 has been a very good number that's worked. Our goal is to supply 100%. Yeah, that's our intent.
The second question is, where do you plan to stage these vehicles for the convoy?
So we do not have a firm agreement with anyone at this time, but it is very close to Silvis Road. There is where the staging area is.
Just,
But it's not proposed in Murrysville, correct? Or is it?
just want to try to get some clarification on the status of the exchanges with the traffic. I know Ms. King's going to come up, but
Yeah.
assume that you operationally will be able to handle some of those. Are you able to handle the responses to Mr. Mudry's recommendations on the changes to the roadways that were recommended, or is that another witness?
That'll be Ms. King will handle those. She's been the one working with Mr. Mudry.
And on the convoy, you had testified earlier that the convoys are going to come with the sand, dump it, then come back. Are there going to be convoys going both directions on the haul route?
We try at all times never to go side to side with a convoy. At that point, there's some sections that are too tight to move both of those convoys through there. So it's only one convoy. They wouldn't be able to make it across each other in some of the sections of that road, sir.
And then I didn't see in the convoy plan any separation between convoys. So could you actually have 2 convoys going in the same direction on the haul route at the same time?
You could at that point, but definitely as short as this haul route is, you would not be stacked up, right behind each other at that point. We would make sure that they're way out in front. But looking at it, for the most part, I think we can get away with 1 convoy with the short haul route there. So our intent would not to be stack up convoys, because then that would also, congest our location as well. Time to time, you may see 2 out there, but I can definitely feel pretty sure no more than 2 would be moving through there at a time.
So I don't personally quite understand how it works. I understand the pilot vehicle. So whenever the vehicles are going to come to an intersection, for example, and so they're going to have to cross into the other lane of travel to make the turn. How is it handled so that any cars either coming down the road or that may be already, in the intersection, how is it handled so that there isn't that conflict with a vehicle?
Right, good question there. So, and then Ms. Jen can even comment on the radius upgrades that we're going to do to widen that out to minimize that impact of having to come all the way across. But for example, say there is a construction project and a large truck is coming down that road and they're taking up more of their space. So the pilot vehicle is out far enough in front to say, hey, this looks clear, this doesn't look good, and then he would be able to CB back to that convoy and say, hey, you guys, can we slow down once we get to the bottom of Silvis there? Let's let this truck come through there. But our goal is to keep that traffic moving at all times through there.
how does the other vehicle know they're not affected by the pilot vehicle? This isn't any wide loads or any, there's no light,
Yes, there is.
there's a light.
Oh, yeah, we have it, and actually they're bannered out. They'll say, say a load is coming, and then it's full. Flashing lights that they would know, hey, something is coming with those escort vehicles.
And
Not much different than what you do see, out on the interstate.
so, obviously, the municipality wants to hear from the traffic consultant, so we, everybody here is subject to being brought back, I think, once we get a response, because there wasn't much time to respond. So,
Are those trucks, are they pulling those empty sandboxes back? Mm-hmm. Okay, so that will add to the time that they're on site.
Not much at all, and we do actually, so with the empties, you won't see near as many empties go out, because we'll stack the empties as they're going through the operation, and we get to a certain point, we may move some out, but it's not as fluid as, say, the actual sand that's in the boxes there.
So the majority of the trucks are returning without sandboxes then?
Correct. But you'll see a mix there, sir, when it comes to that operation.
Attorney Richardson, would it be, we're well into Mr. Johnson's presentation, and this is probably a little late, but going forward, I know reference has been made to the other two representatives, and we'll get to it later. I think for the flow and understanding, if they could answer the specific question, if you understand what I'm saying.
Sure, yeah.
That would be better, because when they speak, we'll forget what we said.
Yep, understood.
Okay.
Okay, one more question on the convoy.
Yes, sir.
I understand it. So you have a pilot truck bringing in 3 trucks.
Yep.
Now, after these trucks unload, are they going to leave as a convoy, or are they going to leave, I'm sorry. Come on. Are they going to leave as a convoy, or are they going to have the pilot truck take them back also?
They always leave as a convoy with the pilot truck with it.
So you only have one pilot truck.
We have a team of pilot trucks that are there, sir. Yeah, no convoy does not have a pilot truck with it, whether it's in or out.
So all the three trucks will wait till they're all empty?
Yep.
And then they all go back together?
Yes, sir.
Any other questions, council? Mr. Hamilton? I'm sorry.
With respect to the water and the letter of intent and so forth, is there anything that can be said public? Is there a particular issue, or?
It's just working through the process with the municipal authority, getting the meeting set up, getting the coordination, but
And I guess you've already said it, though. You feel that this will happen, but you can't say it's. Sorry. Well, it's in the process, okay, I guess you've answered that.
yep. And like I said, MAWC submitted, say, hey, we're in this letter of intent, we're gonna work on getting this project done.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Mr. Hamilton?
How are you, sir?
I'm good. How are you, Mr.
Good,
Johnson?
good.
Good to see you.
Yes, sir.
The council's already asked some great questions, so I'll try to keep my questioning pretty short. But, Mr. Johnson, you're the operations manager for HEX, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And will you be on the site managing development of the Titan well pad?
I will be from time to time.
And can you give us an idea of how often you're on site?
Really, that depends on what we do have going on, but, I usually try to hit the field, say, once a week, once every couple weeks, but we always have a consultant or a HEX representative on site during those operations, sir.
Are you also managing other HEX sites while the Titan site would be in development?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Johnson, you're not a traffic engineer yourself, are you?
No, sir.
So you coordinate with the experts on those issues.
Yes, sir.
You mentioned the different phases of development. The construction phase was the first one. About how, what would be the hours of operation during the construction phase?
So hours of operation during the construction phase is normally, we'll start around daylight, and most of the guys will cut off around, say, between 5, 7 o'clock. Really depends on how much daylight they have out here, but that's a daylight operation, sir.
And the traffic associated with it would be those same hours?
Yes, sir.
And the second phase, the drilling phase, what would be the hours of operation for that phase?
So the hours of operation for drilling, they go 24 hours a day and 7 days a week.
And the kind of materials reference 6 wells on this particular site, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And you've developed other well pads with HEX and maybe other companies as well, is that correct? And how many wells have you seen on other well pads that you've worked on?
It varies, so anywhere from 1, sometimes 2. Been on 3 well pad, 6 well pad, 7, 8. So it's a varying number, sir.
Would it be possible to add additional wells to this particular site?
At this time, our plan is for 6.
Could that plan change? And I guess technically, would it be possible to add additional wells?
It could, but
Calls for speculation, is beyond the scope of the direct. The application is for 6 wells.
I think the application is for 6 wells, but we're talking about a use that would be potentially adding additional wells in the future.
Be another application.
I think what we can state that this approval would be limited to 6, but would also, I think, acknowledge that they're not restricted from coming back.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson, during that drilling phase, you mentioned there would be, I think you said cement trucks, trucks carrying pipe, and also a drill rig brought onto site. Is that right?
yes, sir.
Would there also be materials leaving the site?
Yes.
What kind of materials would be leaving the site on this same haul route?
So obviously, when the drilling process is over, we'll mobilize the drilling rig off location and the associated pipe with that.
And are drill cuttings and other materials from that process
Yes.
removed from site?
Yes, sir.
And I'm assuming those vehicle trips are accounted for in the numbers that you've provided to the traffic engineers here?
Yeah, when we provide the numbers, we try to inclusively capture, every truck in that phase of operation to the best of our ability.
And for these 6 wells, is the drilling completed? Sorry, let me start over. For these 6 wells, are they drilled one at a time, or are they drilled in sequence before the next one's completed, I guess?
So with the intent here at the Titan location with the 6 wells planned, we would drill all 6 wells before the completion activity.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
And that completions phase, the next phase, what are the hours of operation for that phase?
So we do go basically 24/7 there. We do try to cut out or limit our hours during the holiday times as well, just for respect to the workers and the public there as best we can.
You mentioned several different types of vehicles bringing material on site. Is material also leaving the site at that time?
During the completions phase, yes, sir.
What types of materials are leaving the site on that haul route?
So during the completions phase, as Mr. Morrison mentioned, obviously our sand trucks will exit the location during that time.
Are they carrying anything with them at that time?
Empty box at times they will carry with them, sir. And that's probably the majority of what actually leaves.
Is flowback water also leaving the site during that phase?
So during your flowback phase there, yes, produced water would leave the site there.
And is the transport of that produced water, is that permitted by the DEP?
So that does fall under your oil and gas permit, your produced water.
Is that produced water treated as a residual waste by the DEP, to your knowledge?
I can't answer that one specifically.
Is there any testing of the produced water that occurs before it leaves the site? Well, it gets to traffic in that Mr. Johnson has just testified that this material is being transported on this haul route.
How does that, you can re-ask the question and how it relates to trips or traffic specifically.
Or, so I think I asked Mr. Johnson whether the produced water was tested or characterized before it leaves the site to understand the properties of it.
Yeah, I think the limit of his testimony was he acknowledged that it would be trucked off-site. Is there any other traffic-related question to the flowback water?
That's it for now. Mr. Johnson, the production phase. What are the hours for traffic trips related to the production
Phase. So we'll explain that process out a little bit more here. So when the well does go into production, after the completion activities completed there, and we start, you'll hear the word flowing the well back. Obviously, we'll have some initial water that will be coming off of that location. And so maybe you see, 10, 20 water trucks coming off initially, but over those first couple weeks, you start seeing that cutting way down. And then on, some of our locations today, you may see a truck out there once every couple weeks or once every month. So, the water production comes down dramatically. And then for the lease operator, they're out there maybe once a day initially. And then as time goes on in the life of the well, they're periodically out there during the production phase, sir.
In your experience, how long is the production phase and that traffic anticipated to last?
So when you look at it from experience, obviously, since I've started in Marcellus Shale, there still are wells, in production to this date at that point. And then with the traffic, some of these wells, you're not going to be moving a water truck out there, but maybe once every couple months, or, it keeps stepping down through time. But, in my experience, there are still wells producing.
I guess you can't say for certainty how long that might
No.
last in this case. Okay. And if HEX did come back to get approval for additional wells, that would require drilling and completions for those wells to start over again. Is that correct? Sorry, to occur for those new additional wells?
Yes, sorry.
And would it be possible to, these 6 wells that HEX is seeking approval for now, is it possible to re-stimulate those wells?
Like a refrac on the well itself.
Correct.
I've never personally done one myself at this time, but that really doesn't have to do with traffic per se. So,
The operations manager, Mr. Johnson.
yes, sir.
So if that did occur, would the traffic associated?
We're getting into speculation about future events unrelated to this application.
Well, these are the 6 wells that are being approved that I'm asking about at this time, and I'm asking about whether the traffic associated with the completions phase would be repeated if these 6 wells are refracked, as Mr. Johnson mentioned, in the future.
Not having a specific completion design for a refrac, it'd be very difficult to answer the magnitude of traffic that we would need for that associated process.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point, and council wouldn't know when that would occur, obviously, so it's actually something we would think about as a condition. If there's a refrac, we would want, I'd recommend that the municipality see this again, so. That's a good point on what could happen in the future, and then you being able to look at traffic whenever that activity would occur.
Mr. Johnson, just a few quick other questions. Moving on, related to the haul route that was selected, were any alternative routes considered?
We did look at other routes, specifically Stahl Schaefer, looked at those alternative routes. If you want her to speak to that, she can now. That'd be up to you all.
Yes.
Okay.
My name's Jennifer King. I'm the project manager with Stahl Schaefer Engineering. And initially, HEX tasked us with evaluating optional haul routes into the Titan well pad. We settled on the one that Manny had displayed earlier, but prior to that, we looked at several different options. We looked at accessing strictly via Hilty Road, which is a PennDOT road until Bollinger. And we did not like where it intersects with 66, SR 4051, which is the state route number for that road. The way it angles back off of 66 prevents alignment issues for the larger trucks turning into that intersection, as well as there are additional residential driveways that access SR 4051 in comparison with Silvis, a small portion of Hilty and Bollinger. There were significantly less residential driveways accessing those roads. We looked at coming in from the opposite end of Bollinger. However, there were several alignment issues with that as well. There's one curve that has a structure in it on a bend that would basically require a structure replacement and widening to make those curves traversable by HEX's traffic. The truck analysis didn't even show that it could make that turn within the confines of the structure without damaging that structure. So that would have to be replaced and widened, which is impacts to I believe there was a stream crossing at that location, so it's an additional environmental permitting that would also be required for that improvement to happen. We looked at coming in on Weistertown, but again, the number of residential driveways we felt was prohibitive in comparison to what is on Silvis, a small portion of Hilty and Bollinger.
Thank you, Ms. King. Mr. Johnson, I'm going to move on. You mentioned coordination with the school districts. And you mentioned that I think 2 of the school districts have gotten back to you. You're waiting on the 3rd. And they identified, I'm sorry, was that incorrect?
No, the one.
Correct me, Mr. Johnson.
Yes, I can. Let me find my note. School buses here. Okay, so just to kind of reiterate the question you asked there, so Greensburg Salem does not have any on that haul route. Kiski did respond back with specific pickup and drop-off times. And then Franklin Regional has buses along the proposed haul route and provided general time, but did not provide any specific stops along that route. So we, as I mentioned earlier, we double-check with those folks, and things do change from time to time, so we have to stay engaged.
So you're still waiting for a response about specific stops from Franklin? I'm sorry, I'm sorry. So,
I think he stated that he doesn't know the times or the specific stops. He knows there are stops for Franklin Regional along the route, but doesn't know the details yet.
okay.
Is that correct, Mr. Johnson?
So, just to be clear, Franklin Regional has buses along the proposed haul route. They didn't give us any windows or specify that they had a specific stop in that time. So we would have to re-engage with them to double check, just to be clear on that one.
And I believe in your direct testimony, you mentioned that HEX would avoid the times that those buses are running on the route. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Does that mean that no HEX traffic would be on the route during those times identified by the school district?
So we do put blackout times. You might hear the terminology used before, but we do tell our vendors that, hey, you will to be off of this road at this time period once we get the final, hey, this is where the school buses will be.
Otherwise, are there plans for any flaggers along the truck route?
Not specific in the sense of having flaggers out stopping traffic. We prefer to use the escort vehicles in front.
Regarding the potential for an agreement for water to be piped to the site, do you have an anticipated timeline when you'll know for sure whether that's possible?
I do not have a specific time period, but we are in current negotiations with them, and we'll obviously move as fast as we can, and they'll let us.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson.
Yep, thank you, sir.
Man, I just want to clarify one of council's final questions. In your direct testimony regarding avoiding traffic on the roads during school bus operation hours, I believe you referred to heavy truck traffic. Is that correct? I think the question was phrased, all HEX traffic. There still might be pickup trucks or employees coming and going during.
There could be a potential for pickup truck, yes, sir.
Yep. Thank you. Any final questions?
Yeah, I do. Any council have any? I have a couple.
Yes, sir.
Just to understand, Mr. Hamilton, we understand from the traffic information that was exchanged, the letters, that it seems like the WB62s, which are the sand trucks, are the primary focus of the convoys. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Is that the only thing? Are there other pipes or rigging trucks that also will need?
Yeah, main focus is the sand. Obviously, that's our most in quantity that comes through there, but any other, large item would be piloted in, sir.
And what would you expect that they would be? What trucks would be oversized?
For example, once we finish, say, the completion activity of the well, we come in and we bring out our completion rig to get the well ready for production, so that would be piloted in. Also, any, loads that are with that completion rig would be piloted in as well. And then anything, obviously, the facility folks that come in to put the production equipment, install it, some of those loads would require an escort in it as well. But those are a lot less, they're just not as numerous as the sand trucks, yeah.
And you showed us, and I don't remember now if that was at the Planning Commission or at Council or both, but you showed us some other sites. You showed us tonight the widening for the bridge. I think you showed us a site where you actually had some one-way traffic, and I think that wasn't handled via pilots, that was actual via flagmen.
Yeah, so that section through there in the Upper Borough, we did have a flagger present, but with that specific issue there, we had to maintain traffic flow, making a left-hand turn, and so they were placed there just to ensure that the trucks were stopping or moving if they needed to be in that particular section there. But with the bridge itself, the picture I showed, let me see if I can pull it up quick.
I think we saw that bridge
Yeah.
seemed to be widened, so that wasn't the issue. It wasn't
Yeah.
stopped. Is there anything, are there any geometric conditions here similar to Upper Burl that would warrant flagmen?
So the intent's no, not to use the flagman, but the escort vehicles there. And when Ms. Jennifer goes over her testimony on what our upgrades are to those intersections, she'll be able to obviously explain, how that helps those turning radiuses there. And, being able to keep traffic flow moving, because if they did cross way over, obviously we'd have to stop traffic at that point.
Do you have any other sites where your sand trucks had to be convoyed, all of them?
So this will actually be for HHEX, where I've been with Huntley and Huntley Energy Exploration, will be our first, we have to have a convoy for our sand trucks in, just due to the haul route in.
Do you happen to be familiar with any other, not HHEX obviously, but any other wells where you're familiar with the convoys?
Not ongoing currently, sir, no.
Well, however, is there any municipality we could look to see how it worked in that town? Did anyone else?
Talking about other operators?
Yeah, is there anyone else we could look for a resource to see how that may have worked? Or
You guys could, obviously, you could talk with the Upper Burl folks. It's not a specific convoy plan, but that road, we did have to do the full repair on it. We did have to widen the bridge there, and be more than happy to put them in contact, how we operated, how we did. You'll hear, they're more willing to get you guys together with them.
Have you had any other operations where you've had someone along the haul route to check speed, to watch, whether it's a radar or whatever method they use?
Not where we've specifically called someone out to say, hey, check speed. In my past, we did have an area where we did have to actually have some folks out there monitoring speed, just due to some of the narrow roads down in West Virginia, up in the Wetzel, Marshall County area there. I did have speeds monitored out there in the past if we felt like there was an issue.
Yeah, and I'll just say my concern is that, right now we have to assume that none of the water will be piped in. I mean, I know there's efforts being made to do that, but at this point, we have to assume it's 100% hauled right now. With that, looking at the estimates, looking at the timeline of certain parts of the operation, it's very, very, very tight. And it seems like to get the desired amount of equipment in, whether it's equipment, sand, whatever the item is on the back of the truck, that's, I'm sure there's pressure. I know there's pressure. I know there is pressure on these truck drivers to keep it moving, from personal experience. So that's a concern. It's just watching speed.
Yep.
Can I ask a follow-up question? In that regard, Manny, isn't a convoy system safer because their speeds are going to be controlled by the lead vehicle?
Yeah, obviously with the convoy, they can't, obviously pass up the escort vehicle there. So that is obviously a good control point when it does come to speed. But vendors that, that have sped in the past, we've addressed those. We've disciplined in the past. We've ran vendors off that won't abide by our haul route if they won't abide by our rules. So it's nothing out of the norm for us to discipline a vendor if need be. There is an issue.
I was surprised to hear, as came out, that you're not on site all the time and once a week or once every other week. Whoever is on site, if a safety-related issue, traffic or otherwise, comes up, they have the authority to stop whatever's...
Yeah, so can I explain a little bit to our philosophy, but we do, engage our vendors and then also our site consultants that we have out there that are supervising those locations. They have stop work authority, so they have full authority to shut any job down at any point if something is not right there. So it doesn't have to come from me to say, we need to shut them down or we need to remove them from location there, so.
Just as a question, and not to get too detailed, and tell me if I'm being too detailed, but is there like a log of like the stop work authority, like, you know, Mr. Richardson, Mr. Spadaro, whatever, blah, 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 has stop work authority? Is there a log like that?
So we do fill out, we have our HEX employees to have signed, hey, we have the authority to stop work, but each day at our locations, especially during our completion, our drilling activities, we do what they call JSA, job safety analysis, and at that point, stop work authority is addressed. And keep in mind, even say the laborer or the rouster, whoever's out there, everyone on location has the authority to shut the job down, because if they see something that isn't or say safe, or if they see something that we're not doing according to procedure, we want them to shut it down there. So it's not a specific set of people that has the authority to shut it down. Anyone can, and that's our culture, at our company, and we stand behind that.
Can we move to our next witness?
Well, in fairness to Mr. Hamilton, your redirect was limited, but ours was pretty extensive. So, Mr. Hamilton, did that raise any other issues you want to address? Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All tractor trailers be piloted in? All types of
Yeah, the big loads they'll be piloted, sir. Yes, sir.
tractor trailers?
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Well, can I ask that, when you say tractor trailer, are we saying anything that would, well, does that include, triaxles? Does that include larger, the frac trucks?
Yeah, if you, for example, if you're bringing in your say a handful of, the frac pumps coming in, some of them aren't necessarily what you would consider always a full tractor trailer. Some of the auxiliary equipment, we would convoy that in as well.
Anything else?
All right, thank you, Manny.
Thank you, men and ladies.
Yes?
Jennifer, you already sorry. Jennifer, you already introduced yourself. Could you do that again, just so it's at this point in the transcript?
Yes, my name is Jennifer King. I'm the project manager with Stahl Schaefer Engineering.
Okay. And can you describe for council your educational background?
Yes, I have a degree in civil engineering.
And how long have you, what year was that degree obtained?
2007.
Okay. And do you have experience in traffic analysis and control?
Yes, I have experience in preparation and analysis of traffic control plans for various types of roadway projects.
And does that experience extend to traffic analysis and control for oil and gas well pads?
Yes, it does. I've have several clients that I've worked with to evaluate haul routes and improvements for roadways.
Okay, and about how many years have you been doing this type of work?
I've been doing this since September of 2014, so about 4.5 years.
Okay. And what are your professional licensing and certifications?
I'm a licensed professional engineer in the state of Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and Ohio.
And we're going to offer you as our traffic expert as part of our presentation. Can you describe generally, why what should be qualified as an expert in traffic analysis and control?
Yes, I'm an experienced project manager within the industry. I've worked on several transportation-related projects, both in the oil and gas and private industry, as well as the public projects.
Have you been qualified as an expert witness in prior proceedings?
No, I have not. I presented to the Planning Commission here, but Stahl Schaefer has never been requested to provide expert testimony for traffic-related issues with oil and gas development.
Okay. And can you describe your role with respect to this project?
Stahl Schaefer serves as the traffic consultant. So within that role, I serve as project manager for all of our projects that HEX assigns to us. We analyze their haul routes, developing a preliminary haul route for their evaluation and feedback as well. For this specific, we conducted a traffic impact study per municipality requirements, and we also orchestrate for HEX and other clients roadway agreements for maintenance and bonding and permitting.
Mr. Johnson already went over HEX's compliance with the traffic control performance standards in the zoning ordinance, which is section 22031 CC 8A. And I'd like to discuss some of the technical aspects of those provisions with you. We spoke in response to a previous question that the route has to be designed to minimize impact on municipal streets and to take precautions to ensure safety of persons in areas for road crossings and adjacent. So I think a backdrop to that is development of anticipated truck volumes for the operations. Can you describe the process that you went through with HEX to develop those volumes as part of the traffic study?
Yes, in general, as many had mentioned, the well pad has different stages of development, construction, drilling, completions, and production. So we worked with Huntley & Huntley to evaluate those different stages and what typical truck volumes are. This represented a little bit different analysis than what your typical transportation engineering project would do in looking at volumes on the roadways. Typically, trip generation is done through the ITE handbook, which is the International Transportation Engineers Handbook, which stipulates specific trip generation volumes and numbers that you should use for different land uses. There are over 900 land uses included in ITE's handbook. Oil and gas development, well pad development is not included in that handbook. So with that, this was an atypical traffic study for looking at the volume of traffic that was going to be on this road. So with HEX, we sat down and we looked at similar pads that they have built for the different stages, as well as their industry standards. So with the construction stage, I have shown here on the table with the overhead.
We can get that up on the screen.
Could you bring up the overhead, please?
So I'm just going to walk through each stage that we looked at with HEX. What you see here is the construction stage. And for that duration that Manny had mentioned, we averaged out the truck volumes over that entire construction duration. And we're showing basically that we're going to have 15 daily trips that are using this route during construction. And that represents an average truck volume through that route.
And Manny testified that those operational hours for the construction stage are daylight hours, is that correct?
Correct.
That's what you anticipated? Mm-hmm. Okay. So that's construction. How about the drilling stage?
So again, the drilling stage here, again, we worked with HEX. These numbers represent similar cases that they've had on other sites, as well as some of their industry projections that they use. And those are based on the specific site geology that they're looking at, the length of the vertical and horizontal drill paths that they're using. So during drilling, we're anticipating a total of 55 daily trips during the drilling operations.
And then in terms of duration, your analysis assumed the development of all 6 wells? Correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And what is there a typical duration expected for drilling per well?
Yes, HEX anticipates 15 to 20 days of drilling activity per well.
Okay, and how about the completion stage?
In general, when we looked at the completions, initially we looked at available logs that HEX was able to provide us from some of their other sites, specifically the Midas pad and the Poseidon pad. Once we worked into it and looked at the numbers, we felt that these were low traffic volumes. So when we went back with HEX and used their projection data that they use and calculations, which I can step through as well later, to get more conservative volumes on the total daily trips. So what you
Conservative meaning assuming greater number of trips.
Yes, correct. So there's 3 different scenarios shown here for the completions. So briefly, I'll describe them. For assuming that 100% of the water has to be trucked into the site, and because of that, their efficiency during hydraulic fracturing is a little lower. We're anticipating 806 daily trips total. If we are able to get on-site water, 100% of that water being piped to the site, but depending on the flows, kind of maintaining a similar efficiency, that number becomes 158 total daily trips. If they're able to get a sufficient flow of water to increase efficiency up to the 4 hydraulic fracturing stages per day that Manny had alluded to earlier, the total daily trips is 202.
But in that third scenario, the overall duration of the process is reduced because they're doing additional stages per day.
Correct. Their operations are more efficient. So you'll see more vehicles, but the duration is shorter.
So those are your trip generation projections. Can you also review for council your projections regarding the number of vehicles per day?
Yeah, so basically, the vehicles per day for this development, we're assuming that every vehicle that enters the site also has to exit the site. So that's 1 trip. So for instance, we would be looking at 403 vehicles per day under 100% water hauled and the 4 stages of hydraulic fracturing per day.
Yeah, can you walk through the rest of this?
The production.
Yeah.
Okay. The next stage is the production stage, which Manny had indicated is a longer duration and is somewhat unknown on that total duration. But the truck traffic decreases significantly, and for purposes of evaluating that with the roadway system, we looked at assuming that there would be a total of 5 daily trips per day. But as Manny had indicated, those numbers could be higher for a little period of time initially and significantly lower with just 2 to 5 a month. So we felt this was a conservative estimate.
Sorry, did we, I may have just missed it, the duration of the completion stage?
It is approximately 30 days per well. So for doing completions operations for all 6 wells, we're looking at roughly 180 days.
Thank you.
When you said 30, I thought you originally said 15 to 20 days per well.
That is for the drilling.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're right.
So that would be up to 120 total for the 6.
Correct.
So I think we've covered this in some of your answers, but why are there variations for the completion stage but not the other stages?
There are variations in the completion stage. This is due to the water solution and the water, what's available for water. None of the other stages are reliant upon the source of water and how it gets to the site.
Okay. So you talked about how you came up with the projections for each stage. What is the difference between a typical vehicle and a heavy, excuse me, a heavy vehicle, as you've used those terms in this chart?
A typical vehicle is something that you're used to seeing out on the roadways, such as passenger cars, pickup trucks, small delivery vehicles, motorcycles, that type of vehicle. What we show here is a heavy vehicle. We've classified as our single unit trucks, what you're used to seeing as a water truck, and then things such as a WB62, which are combination trucks or semi-trailers. Additionally, some of the vehicles that Manny had mentioned for the rig movements in and out, those type of things, low boys, flatbed, larger trailers.
And on your chart, can you explain to council what the term design peak hour refers to?
Yes. The design hour volume for the Titan well site represents the highest projected hourly volume over a given 24-hour period of time. We utilize that for design purposes. We take that design hour volume and apply it to a typical weekday peak hour, which is typically the morning and afternoon rush hours. So, for instance, at Titan Well Pad, we've projected that the peak hour is likely going to be in the afternoon, 11 a.m., but then that peak hour volume gets applied to your standard morning and afternoon rush hours as a worst-case scenario.
Right, even though the anticipated peak hours are not during morning
Correct.
rush hour, right? Okay. And in your analysis and review, did you identify potential areas of concern along the haul route?
Yes, we did, based on the existing geometry of the roads, width, and condition of the roadways.
Okay, can you identify those on a map for council?
So I walk through them. We're starting at the Titan Well Pad location. We've identified 5 total areas that we've recommended for roadway improvements. Area number 1 is what we refer to as the curve along Bollinger Road. We're recommended widening this curve to prevent water trucks to be able to pass each other simultaneously in each direction, as well as a sand truck and a passenger vehicle to pass simultaneously. Area number 2 is an area of an existing culvert that we are recommending that they install a temporary bridge and paving to limit damage to the existing culvert there, similar to what Manny had provided in pictures at another project location. Area 3 is the intersection of Bollinger and Hilty Road. We're recommending that we do radius improvements there to permit the truck turning movements in and out of that intersection. Again, those would be laid out and designed so that all turning movements are made while staying in the vehicle lanes, not crossing over into opposing traffic. Because that is a state route, that will require a PennDOT highway occupancy permit application, and that is one requirement that PennDOT has. You cannot show your vehicle turning movements crossing into opposing traffic. And similarly, at Area 4, we are recommending radius improvements at this intersection as well, and it's the intersection of Hilty and Silvis. And again, that would also require a PennDOT highway occupancy permit. Area number 5 are gradual back-to-back curves along Silvis, and we're proposing or recommending that they be widened to permit water trucks to pass each other simultaneously. Additional improvements that we've recommended?
Yeah, please.
Okay. This is just actually a snip directly from our recommendations that were included in the report. Some of those we've already talked about. And as part of the pad on Bollinger, they're going to construct a driveway. They're providing 1 lane for ingress and egress, as well as providing stop sign there for stop control. Bollinger Road, Hilty Road, and Silvis Road within the municipality, we're recommending that HHEX perform a full-depth reclamation and asphalt overlay the entire section of the haul route within the municipality. And that's primarily due to the existing condition and structural capacity of the road. And as well as the convoy plan, which has been submitted and under review.
And these were all developed in consultation with Murrysville's traffic engineer?
That's correct.
Through the comment process? And is it your opinion with these mitigation measures, HEX has satisfied the zoning requirements in section 220-31 CC 8A1 and A3?
Yes.
And as I mentioned, you had received comments from the municipality's traffic engineer on your report?
That is correct.
And those, have you addressed those comments?
We have addressed all of his comments to date. The most recent supplemental letter was submitted earlier this month, and as far as we're aware, that is still under review.
Thank you. Is it your understanding that HEX is willing to accept the conditions that are set forth in Traffic Planning and Design's July 9th, 2019 comment letter?
Yes.
Which is the most recent you've received?
Correct.
And is it your opinion that the chosen haul route has the least amount of impact on the community as opposed to the other alternatives that you considered?
Yes.
And is it your opinion that the proposed project will maintain an acceptable level of service at all intersections?
Yes.
And is it your opinion that from a traffic perspective, with HEX's agreement to implement the municipality's traffic consultant's recommendations, is it your opinion that HEX's operations can be completed in a safe manner?
Yes.
One correction, the date of the most recent comment letter from your traffic engineer is June 19th. Questions from council?
Council, any questions?
One general question, and it has to do with this. I know residents, you either get your water from MAWC or else you drill a well. And I'm sure that the answer is going to be, you can't drill a well for water?
That's
Not you,
beyond
I know
my
that's
level.
traffic.
consultant.
Well, is Manny, can he answer that?
We should, when we get to water, I think
Okay,
we should,
It's fine.
specifically ask that.
okay.
Two questions. The northbound Bollinger stop sign, would that be a temporary stop sign until completion of the operation?
Are you talking about the stop sign at the proposed driveway?
Correct, yes.
Yeah, it wouldn't be a stop sign physically on Bollinger for the traffic. It would be on the property, the access driveway for HEX, so that there would be a stop controlled location there for them to enter and exit onto Bollinger.
And this may have been answered earlier, but at the driveway of the site, with that much, I mean, that's a tremendous amount of truck traffic going back, entering and exiting. Is there somebody, did we say there was someone on site to direct that, to stop traffic coming from the northbound on Bollinger? Well, while it's minimal, is that something that is available?
Andy, do you want to?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, coming coming northbound on Bollinger, or really anywhere, I should say. On anywhere, is there, with that much heavy truck traffic coming in and out at once, someone who is just driving on the road is not part of that operation, is there someone to control that truck traffic outside of the pilot vehicle?
Not normally. So like if you think when they make their turn onto to Bollinger before they turn left into the site there,
Right.
What the escort vehicles will do is they'll position themselves to where they go basically out past right past the access road in. That way, if there is anything coming up making that turn, they would know, oh, I need to stop as those trucks are making that turn into location. I think that's what you're asking there.
Yeah, that answers.
Yeah, because when you go up and over and down, I definitely see where you're coming from there. So yeah, we'll make sure that's covered.
I would like to add to that as well. Manny, don't go away, I guess. That with the site designer of CEC, that driveway was sited in such a way that adequate site distance per PennDOT requirements is met for driveways, for traffic entering and exiting from all directions into that location.
And my question, though, comes from, again, a point of experience. I spent a lot of time in Washington Township, and went on a lot of those back roads, a lot of well sites, and there was, whenever you're driving on it, somebody who does not, if somebody just lives in the community, they're not familiar with what's going to happen there. They see 6 tractor trailers, potentially 6 tractor trailers, moving through there. They don't know what's happening if they're coming out. If those trucks, their goal, I'm sure, is to stay behind the pilot vehicle as instructed. Somebody coming through there might not know that. They don't know what to do. They just see trucks coming out of there. And again, I've experienced it firsthand. But I think a lot of people would be very uncomfortable with it if there wasn't just some manner of control letting them know.
Yeah, you gotta have that escort kind of out when they're making that turn in there.
Yeah, you grab your mic, please.
Yeah, you have to have that escort vehicle basically out in front, and then as they're making the turn to location, he can flag anything that comes up the hill from that side on Bollinger.
While we have you, maybe you can answer Carl's question about the water, eliminating the water trucks via a well on site.
So for that question, when in regards to sourcing water from a water well, they don't provide the rate that we require to be able to.
I didn't think so. I thought possibly to augment it.
Yeah.
Because, no.
Even augmenting, it's so small, and then it's a little bit of a almost not quite a guessing game on how much rate will that water well actually deliver to you. So never have done that in the past, but that's a good question.
I need to turn my tape.
And one more question. If the places where you're looking on near the intersection of Silvis and Hilty, where I'm not sure which number that was on your map, but is that you saying you would look to widen that area? Is that something that I know that they're narrow roads as they stand now. Is that something you would have to move into personal property, or is that something that what is there will allow you to widen that sufficiently?
We do anticipate the need to acquire right-of-way for that that improvement, and there is also the potential at location number 3, Bollinger and Hilty, as well. And with that right-of-way would, if it was able to be acquired, would be transferred to the municipality.
Any other questions of council? Yes, I have a few. Ms. King, I take it just from the numbers, it goes without saying that piping the water in minimizes the traffic impact.
That's correct.
In terms of volumes. And are those water trucks, are they convoyed into, or are they outside the convoy?
They are outside of the convoy.
And the information that the owner provided at the Midas pad and Poseidon pad, you actually went more conservative. So
Correct.
those numbers. How do you anticipate, and maybe this is another witness, how do you anticipate that the municipality or the neighbors would be able to check whether we're within those limits? Is that a self-count? Is there any record kept? Who counts the trucks?
So to the question on the convoy there, if we are having to supplement with considerable amount of water trucks, we will escort that in. We've always kind of included our water trucks as part of our convoy there. Those obviously are, a lot of times we do run some semi-trailers that are water, so those definitely need to be escorted. Then you'll see some shorter trucks. Maybe you run a convoy out to say 4 or something along those lines, but we do typically convoy our water trucks in. And then ask your second question again, just to make sure that I answer it.
Just, we have projections accounts, which typical, if you're not using the ITE, then the engineer has to rely on, the owner or an estimate. So how is that tracked to see whether you're staying within those numbers?
So obviously, it's an estimate, to the best of our knowledge with what we know today, but we do have, so as I mentioned earlier, we have our security on location during that completion activity, and every individual that comes onto that location, they are documented, and there is a record that is kept.
And is that something that's available to the municipality if they want to just check occasionally?
Has it ever been requested by a municipality?
I don't know for sure if it's ever been requested. I've never provided personally to a municipality.
I'm just wondering, is that is there any privacy or concerns where that wouldn't be made available if there's a question?
Not that I'm aware of.
The convoys were selected, we assume, for a reason. Did you look at other alternatives to a convoy? And what were the other alternatives that you decided that this is the best method to have those trucks come in and out?
Take it. We can kind of maybe tag team on this one a little bit, but so obviously when we looked at this route, you'd like to not have to convoy, and you like just be able to move in and move out without any stopping there. But for this particular instance, and in my past experience, you could do some alternatives of, like some have asked, why not do flaggers or do something along those lines. But a lot of times it can make the traffic, a little bit choppy, and what the convoy would do is allow it to move a little more fluidly, with, obviously you've got a couple stops anyways with the intersection. So from an operations standpoint, the convoy plus the road improvements, we feel like is the best solution for the Titan well pad. Some of our other well pads, we've not had to do any convoying, as I mentioned earlier. And then we had the one flagger station just to make sure that traffic did keep moving there. So we do kind of recipe it to each specific road and based off our experience what works.
I'm curious because when we had looked at the geometric challenges, it looks like all of those have been addressed, and I thought that's what was requiring convoying. What is left after the geometric adjustments? What's left in the haul route that's requiring convoys or flagmen?
So I'll do it. So for this one, there's also two townships that exist here as well. You have, obviously there are some narrow sections on Silvis Road that exist that we wanted to make sure that we could navigate appropriately for those folks. And then also, even though, we're taking care of all the geometry, as a prudent operator, for this area, we just feel like that will provide us the safest way in. Even though the geometry is getting solved per Jen's work there, we still wanted to say, all right, let's take maybe an extra step, or take the right step might be the best way to say it, to ensure that when there is a turn made here, that these people know that, hey, we've got 3 large trucks coming around this turn here. So it's just part of what we do as a company. You're not always maybe solving for that specific thing, but what can we do to ensure the safest and kind of most compliant operation out there, and to keep it moving it helps everyone in that regard, I guess would be the best way to answer it.
Okay, so
I did want to clarify one thing with the geometry that we talked about. In our curves and intersections, we're looking at improving that geometry for these smaller water trucks to make that simultaneous movements in and out. The geometry is not proposed to be improved to pass the larger sand trucks like the WB 62s in each direction simultaneously. So that also leads to why we still want to stick with the convoy.
Okay. And despite the fact that's still within PennDOT requirements, without a convoy for those trucks?
I don't know that they have specific requirements on that. The only thing that PennDOT maintains is a posted weight limits for either the roadways and the bridges. And that is the only thing that is restricting traffic in terms of PennDOT requirements. They do not restrict traffic for geometric reasons unless there's they will also occasionally have a safety posting, which is much less frequent than what you see the weight limit postings or bridge limit postings.
I asked way too open-ended a question. So without the convoys or anything, those sand trucks are good at these intersections as far as PennDOT goes.
Correct, yes, sorry.
And your design has basically been based on the WB62s. There are going to be bigger trucks occasionally than that?
We would anticipate the oversized trucks to be related to the larger equipment coming into the site and the drill rig equipment that comes into the site, which is less frequent. And those have to be specifically permitted as well through the state. And those movements get specific requirements attached to them as part of that oversized permit regulation.
Are there any, standard engineering practices? I assume with like flagmen, probably politically incorrect now, right? But that's what it's going to be, I guess. Flagmen. How far apart they have to be, and walkie-talkies. Are there regulations for that, and are there similar ones for convoying?
There are regulations for flagging traffic on a temporary basis, primarily related to construction. So construction operations. PennDOT will actually not let you flag on their roads for operational things like oil and gas traffic to and from a well pad site, unless it is specifically related to a driveway or an oversized permit requirement. But the standards that exist are through PennDOT for temporary traffic control related to construction, which we have taken to apply in construction or at driveway locations. And Manny, you had mentioned something with a municipal or local road where you had some flagging. So those can be applied in that situation. But on state roads, you are prohibited from flagging traffic in that.
So at these two PennDOT intersections, flagman is not an option?
Not if you're holding traffic on the state road.
And
unless it's tied to the oversized permit.
right, yeah, the special ones, which you may have. With respect to, like the geometric concerns, I assume the municipality is going to get sealed plans, so your license is standing behind it.
Correct.
On the convoying, is there anybody standing behind that plan saying this is consistent with engineering practice? This is how you convoy?
Those aren't something that's typically, I guess, sealed by an engineer, but I can tell you when we discussed it with HHEX prior to submission, we consulted a couple of military manuals actually on military convoys, as well as their one of their water managers as well for their standard practices for convoys.
Raise any other questions? Mr. Hamilton?
I'm sorry.
Hi, Ms. King. How long have you been a project manager with Stahl and Schaefer?
I've been a project manager with Stahl Schaefer for a little over a year and a half.
How long have you worked on this project specifically?
It probably goes back to last summer when they initially had us beginning looking at the haul route.
Have you looked at haul routes for other oil and gas operations?
Yes.
How many of those have you done in the past?
It would be hard for me to count.
Give us a best guess.
In the past 4 years, we've done Stahl Schaefer, myself as an engineer and as a project manager in that, have looked at numerous haul routes for several clients in the Marcellus Shale in Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and Ohio. I'm just trying to think of to give a reference of what I looked at this year, just. Really on the upwards of 40 just this year.
And when you're conducting this type of, oh, sorry, let me back up. For any of those sites or any of your other work, have you done traffic impact studies such as this one here?
No, we have not.
So this is something a little bit unique.
It is unique to Murrysville in comparison to the other municipalities and agencies that we've worked with.
And what was your role then in regard to those other haul routes that you've worked on?
We analyzed the route with the clients in a similar fashion to what we did here for the initial haul route. We also evaluate the route for geometric concerns, if we would recommend improvements along the route or intersection improvements. And a large concern of a lot of oil and gas industry owners is the capacity of that roadway to handle their traffic from a structural, how much maintenance is going to be required. They evaluate maintaining the road as is or improvements to the road.
Have you done any other sort of traffic volume analysis previously for those operators or other projects?
No, not for any of those other operators.
So this would be sort of the first volume traffic analysis you've done?
Yes, typically the other operators provide total traffic anticipated for their various stages that we look at for pavement designs.
In your opinion, does sort of never mind, strike that. Ms. King, the traffic count that you completed as part of this traffic impact study, how was that conducted?
The traffic counts that were conducted for the study are done to collect existing traffic data at the various roadways.
How's that data collected?
We did it two different ways. We did turning movement counts for the intersections, and then there are also these devices that are a tube-like device that gets put across the roadway and counts the axles that drive across it, and then there's a computer program that generates that traffic output.
And for the first one you said was the
Turning movement counts.
Turning movement.
Yes.
Is that a device as well, or is there someone out there?
There's typically someone out there counting.
Okay. And that's how you, based on those two methods, you developed the total volume counts in the report?
For existing traffic only.
For existing
Yep.
traffic, okay. And so those two methods, they would pick up passenger cars?
Mm-hmm.
They'd pick up heavy trucks?
They break it up by axles of vehicles.
So it would consider like a school bus, it would have 2 axles, is that right?
Yeah, it would be based on the
Just as an
spacing. Yeah,
example.
they estimate it based on the spacing.
Okay. So would it pick up a motorcycle as well?
Yes.
What about like a bicycle?
I'm not sure, but I don't think it would pick up bicycles because of the pressure.
Okay, so bicycles weren't considered as part of this analysis?
No.
What about, would it identify like joggers or pedestrians as part of this?
No, because there are no pedestrian facilities on the route, so they were not evaluated.
Okay, so no one was out there counting whether there's pedestrians walking or jogging on this route?
No.
Okay. And the projected traffic patterns then, once you've developed this sort of existing volume analysis, you projected out to 2023, is that correct?
I believe so, yes.
And my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, was that was based on sort of a traffic growth rate, right? So,
Yes, the existing traffic is grown at a rate dictated by Southwest Planning Commission for the region.
and if it were, so that traffic growth rate is applied to the existing volume that you
Correct.
identified.
Yes.
And what's done with that result?
That basically gives us our development year traffic in a base condition with no development. And then we add in the development traffic as a result of oil and gas.
And you projected this out to 2023.
Yes, that was the anticipated timeframe for the completions.
And would the sort of base analysis change if this were projected to, say, 2024?
It could change, but given the location, it would be very minimal.
And that change would be based on the traffic, right?
Correct.
So if it were projected out to 2028, the change would be larger, right?
Yes.
Regarding the, actually, it's the figure you have in front of you now.
On the overhead?
The overhead, I think those were the roadway improvement areas.
Correct, yes,
Okay.
correct.
And is it your opinion that the improvements proposed here are necessary to meet PennDOT regulations?
They are necessary to provide the safe movement of the HEX larger truck traffic through those intersections and those curves.
So without these changes, the whole route would not be safe for this traffic?
Yes.
And on area number 1, is an additional right-of-way acquisition necessary there?
We anticipate that a small area would be required for right-of-way.
Can you give us an idea of what that area, that additional right-of-way area
No.
needs to be acquired?
No, we're not going to get into that. In fact, I know we did a little bit from council questions, but we have to assume that the plans they submit, they'll have to acquire title. So whatever it is, you'll have to meet that, however you do it. The municipality can't acquire into title or acquiring title or quality of title. We have to assume that they're going to present title. So.
Have you contacted any of those property owners?
We're not going to get into, we're not going to get into what's needed. We're going to assume they're going to have to establish a municipality. They have the rights to it, however they do it.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. King.
Thank you.
Mr. Richardson, any redirect? No. I just have one question. I don't know if it was answered. Have you done a convoy plan before?
I have not done a convoy plan.
Is it Stoll Schaefer, are you aware that your company has, or are you aware of any others that have been implemented for any other wells?
I am not aware of any that the people that I work with in the Western PA area of our office have put together. I have physically seen convoys of oil and gas traffic on roads when we're out in Greene County and Washington County, but I'm not aware how those were established or by who.
Just a general comment. Anybody, even outside of the hearing, if you could give the municipality some direction so that we could follow up on what worked and what may have been problematic, that would be helpful. I guess.
Okay.
This is, you have one more witness you mentioned, right? Looks like we have enough. Makes sense to try to get started here, right, with the next witness.
Jen, come on up. So as I mentioned at the outset, we've presented testimony from a number of HEX representatives and experts demonstrating its compliance with the Okay, sure. I just have a little introduction. I just want to say a few, yeah. Okay. So during the course of these three sessions, we present a number of witnesses and experts demonstrate that HEX has complied with the requirements of the zoning ordinance. We have a few outstanding items we'd like to address before we close out our presentation. So with that, I'd like to introduce Jennifer Hoffman from HEX. Can you state your full name for the record?
Jennifer Hoffman, Hoffman.
And what is your title with HEX?
I'm our Vice President of Environmental Health, Safety, and Regulatory.
And could you describe your role on this project?
I've got a clip because it drives the system.
All right, I'm switching. I lead the regulatory and environmental team that compiled the application for the project and reviewed the documents prior to submittal.
And in an earlier session, there were some questions from council regarding how HEX responds to complaints that might be made by residents of the municipality relating to operations. Can you describe for council HEX's complaint procedures and process?
Sure. So the general complaint process that we have at HEX, we have a 24-hour phone hotline that anyone can call. This number's posted on our well site. It's on our website. One of the things that I think somebody mentioned earlier was about outreach. How does a landowner know how to get a hold of HEX? We do a landowner meeting for residents within the area prior to starting construction at any of our locations. We also have something that we call HEX Alerts, which is basically we send out a mailer to residents within the area. You can sign up to get an alert from us whenever something's going on at our well pad, whether that's bringing in large loads. So it's a communication system, kind of like school districts do whenever there's a snowstorm or something like that. We could also, as far as outreach goes, we can post things to our website, and then, if the municipality wants, we could provide updates to the municipality to allow the municipality to do that directly as well. But as far as the complaint process goes, I wanted to give a little bit of detail on our 24/7 hotline. So this is a continuously manned hotline that we have a list of our personnel that would be on call, basically. So if a call would come in that from a resident or a concerned party that there was an issue, they were concerned about an issue on the traffic route, our hotline operator would take that message and then call, if it was an emergency situation, down the list of personnel. So it could go to Manny, it could go to me, it could go to some of the other HEX folks that have spoken with you. If it's not an emergency situation, for example, we get a lot of questions about, when are you going to drill my well for a royalty check? That would be handled through email, probably the next day. As far as other ways that a landowner can lodge a complaint, we do have a questions at HH Energy Co. email address that we can respond to. Of course, a landowner could call our office directly as well. I also want to make sure that the council understands that, dependent on what the issue is, if it's a safety issue, we're going to be responding to it immediately. If it's an emergency issue, we ask anyone to call 911. But if it's a question about kind of routine operations, it would be generally handled the next day. I also wanted to provide a response to, I believe, last time council had asked a question about a water well complaint that we had near our Midas location in Plumboro last year. So last summer we did get a complaint near our Midas location that has been resolved. I want to make sure everybody kind of understands the Pennsylvania DEP process for water well complaints. So a complaint can come either directly to the operator or to Pennsylvania DEP. Pennsylvania DEP then follows up on it. If it comes to us, we have 24 hours to call that into the department. Sometimes the department asks us to cooperate in an investigation. But for oil and gas operations in Pennsylvania, there's a presumptive distance and time. So if you get a complaint that's within 2,500 feet of your well site or within 12 months of any kind of operation, then you're automatically presumed to have caused whatever that issue is. And so then it's on the operator to rebut that presumption, and you can do that through a number of ways. For that issue specifically, we did receive a presumption letter from the DEP. We were working towards rebutting that presumption with DEP when we came to an amicable solution with the landowner with no findings. So that's where we're at on that complaint. I also wanted to address a little bit the Poseidon complaint that we talked about last time. Just to give some additional, from the HEX perspective, you guys got to talk to our noise consultant who was on the, following up on what the complaint was. So we did get about 20 complaints. Some came to us directly. Some came to the township. Most of them came from an Excel file that Protect PT gave to the township with a number of residents' names. Some of them were actually received after our operations were over. And it started about 5 days after the frac began. We didn't have any complaints during our drilling process. We did have one noise monitor that was continuously monitoring on our site. And then we had deployed 2 additional monitors at houses of complainants. The issue really was largely related to the topography of our site. So our well pad set on this knoll. There was a housing development nearby, about half a mile away. And I wanted to make sure that it's understood that we weren't actually out of compliance with Penn Township's regulations at the pad. And we did mitigate the situation somewhat by ramping our engines in a different way during night operations. But we learned a lot of lessons from that. I think that's kind of the important part to pull out here. One, we were able to, for future operations, we were able to adjust some of our equipment, changing engineering on our mufflers, particularly using more robust and often higher sound walls. So I think for this project, we're looking at 32 and 24 feet sound walls. At Poseidon, we hit 16. We have the ability to deploy additional interior walls if we need to, as well as kind of strategically position some of our equipment. Another thing that we've started doing is deploying some instantaneous remote noise monitoring, which allows us to react a lot faster because we have real-time data coming in. And then we are also starting to utilize a newer frac fleet with some different noise mitigation measures. And then following the Poseidon issues that we did have, we've had very few noise complaints through implementing those additional measures. We had a recent one that turned out to be cicadas. We had another one that we were monitoring at our location. We had a complaint come in. We deployed a monitor at that location, and everything was below the ordinance requirements. I did want to make one correction from last week as well. Protect PT's counsel asserted that we've used an electric frac fleet, but we have not done so to date. Our preference would be to use an electric frac fleet. However, our decisions regarding those fleets are based on when our need is and when a fleet is what fleets are available. If a fleet is not available at the time that we have planned operations, we can't commit to using it. I do want to note that some frac companies are also using sound attenuated diesel. And that's actually one that we're planning to use on our upcoming Apollo frac next month.
Thank you, Jen. One other housekeeping matter, or, well, are there any questions on any of those topics?
Maybe it's just getting a little bit long in the day, but Plum, once again, the water contamination, what was the?
So it was a water well complaint. It was not it was not determined as, we did not have a determination from Pennsylvania DEP, and it was resolved amicably with the landowner.
This wasn't mentioned by you, but it came up in one of the previous meetings, and if this is the wrong time, just tell me, but we were looking for a definition of glare when we got to lighting. That was a problem, or is that something to cover at another time? I don't know. Glare, what is the definition of glare?
The definition of glare, so usually it's about lighting off of your site. So it would be if you had, I think Manny mentioned a light plant, right, that would be situated that would impact a landowner. So what we do on our locations is make sure all of our lights are directed downward appropriately and aren't impacting residents off of our location.
Just another housekeeping matter. We've got two other documents we're going to be offering as exhibits. With the exhibits we'll move in at the end, but I just wanted to kind of lay a foundation for that. The Planning Commission had requested at one point a well location plat. Did HEX submit that to the municipality?
Yeah, we submitted that on January 30th.
Okay. And then the Planning Commission provided HEX with potential conditions for its conditional use and land development site plan applications. Is that correct?
Yes.
And did HEX provide a response to those conditions?
Yeah, we submitted a response to the Planning Commission's potential conditions on March 26th.
And then, just to kind of wrap up, we've heard through the presentations that HEX is seeking a modification and a special waiver as part of the process.
That's correct.
Can you review again for council the details relating to the landscape modification?
Sure. So the landscape modification is being requested because landscaping for our site is limited to the perimeter of the project, whereas, you know, a more traditional development would have things like islands or plantings in the middle of the project. Here we also have an open meadow. So what the zoning ordinance would require 81 trees and 401 shrubs. We're proposing 57 evergreens, 6 deciduous trees, and 18 shrubs. And I do want to remind the council that the proposed planning plus the topography of the area will actually create a screen of the project.
And then the special waiver relates to sound. And as we've talked about at the prior meeting, the sound ordinance limits sound to no more than 50 dBA during the day, 40 dBA during the evening, and 45 dBA at night for continuous sound during normal operations. But you're permitted to exceed those on weekdays during daytime hours under the ordinance. Can you describe kind of the back and forth between your sound consultant and the municipality sound consultant and kind of where we came out on that?
Sure. Last week you got to hear from Tage Rosenthal of Acoustical Control, who's our sound consultant, that the ambient background level at the property already exceeds the sound limits that are set forth in the municipality's ordinance. We have had some back and forth with AVT, which is the municipality sound consultant, and even during some of those conversations, in their January 23rd, 2019 letter, they recognize that the ordinance requirements cannot be achieved even without operations. And I want to pull out a specific statement that they had. Based on the content of both reports, it appears that the existing ambient character in the immediate area of the applicant's site already exceeds the municipality of Murrysville noise ordinance requirements, especially during the evening and nighttime hours. Given that the ordinance requirements at the applicant's site cannot be achieved prior to operations, the municipality of Murrysville may either grant an exception during the evening and nighttime hours with no further action, or grant a conditional exception which would require the applicant to address the site-specific noise complaints / violations and provide short-term sound reduction measures.
Thank you. And then HEX has submitted a request for specific waiver limits, correct?
Yes, that's right.
And those were submitted in a letter to the municipality, February 11th, 2019?
Correct.
Would you want to review those again for council?
Sure. So our request to council is that it would apply, a special waiver to the sound levels would apply during our drilling and completions operations conducted during weekday evenings, weekday nights, and weekends. And then the specifics around that are our operations could not exceed 10 dBA above the ambient background level. And as a reminder, the ambient as measured in the field was 58.64 dBA, and that was determined during the 72-hour ambient survey. Adjustments to the waiver would be permitted in accordance with the following: a permitted decrease or a permitted increase of 5 dBA would, the duration of increase in minutes would be 15. For 10 dBA, it would be 5 minutes. For 15 dBA, it would be 1 minute. And for 20 dBA, it would be 1 minute.
Thank you. Any other questions for Ms. Hoffman?
This, if I'm correct on this, and I may not be, but the baseline 56, the monitoring stations used in determining that, I think we were told it was like over 100 kilometers, one of them. No?
No, so the sound study itself was done on the Titan location. I think you might be thinking about the air monitoring that was done for ambient.
You're right. I was thinking of air monitoring. And just let me follow through. Why in the world would be air monitoring? Why would we be 100 kilometers away? That doesn't make any sense at all. 100 kilometers is 60-some miles.
Yeah, and I'm not an air monitoring expert. I mean,
Neither am I.
but my understanding is that's based on DEP's ambient air monitoring network. So it's monitors that are set up throughout the area that would capture what the kind of collective view of that of a specific area of an area would be. It wouldn't be what's happening at the Titan location.
Well, I hear what you're saying. It just doesn't seem to make sense. I mean, if you're going to have monitoring 60 miles away, you're going to cover, U.S. Steel's Coke Works and everything. It's just, in that it doesn't make sense. I don't know what the sensible, to me, you take air monitoring much closer to the site, is my point. And I don't know how we, put that into regulations, but let me stop there, but that was a concern.
Understood.
A couple questions about the noise. There was testimony about the sound walls around the entire site, and there was testimony about that they could actually be augmented. So I guess you chose, what range you think would work. Do you wait for a complaint, or are you actually going to monitor that to see if that wall needs to be augmented?
That's a great question. So we will have continuous noise monitors at our location. We usually pick something that's kind of close to the nearest resident or the nearest receptor, and utilize that as our trigger. So if we would see that that we're getting high noise levels, certainly if we would have an out of compliance situation, we would immediately contact Murrysville for that and self-report. And then we'd know also if we were having an impact on a receptor.
And you mentioned the electric frac fleet. Is that a consultant's contract fleet, or is that a HEX-owned fleet?
It is not a HEX-owned fleet.
So these are people that in the industry.
Yeah, that's right. And Manny can probably address that a little bit better if you want to. But it's not a HEX-owned fleet.
Just worried about the question of availability.
Yeah, yeah, right, which is why we can't guarantee that it'll be available because we don't own it.
So just to give us an idea, is that something that has to be in the tri-state area? Is it a cost availability? What are the parameters there?
So obviously there's a quantity, the amount of or the sound attenuated fleet. Obviously there's a supply and demand that exists there, and how many are available. But like in regards, like if there's one available, out in Texas or, there's usually not an issue mobilizing one of those in. They will do that for you. For example, as Ms. Jennifer mentioned there, for our Apollo frac coming up with our sound attenuated diesel fleet, that was out in the Midwest, and they mobilized it in for us. So we're not, afraid to say, hey, if we want it, we'll try to get it if it's available out there. But obviously there are times when maybe there isn't one available, and that's why we couldn't promise that we would be able to deliver that.
So that frac fleet, electric frac fleet and the sound attenuated diesel, they're in the same category of availability?
Yeah, probably quantity-wise, I would say that's a safe assumption. Yes, sir.
I don't know, Mr. Johnson or Ms. Hoffman, the question about the sound exceeding the background limits, and you have certain levels of that. I don't think we ever got an answer at how many times within any interval that could happen. We have how many times, how long the duration is at that sound for one given time. But if we have 1 second in between, we could indefinitely, do we have any idea of how many times within a period that those things would occur? It actually could be more aggravating than a loud sound that's continuous to have it at intervals start and stop. So I think we understand the fact that there are going to be shorter term noises that exceed 10 dBA over the background. We'd like to, without getting into enforcement mode, give an idea of how often is that really going to occur over what interval. And you don't have to even answer tonight. It's something that I'm going to be looked at, I think, with council.
Off our data. Yep.
Thanks.
We do have data at all of our locations.
Yep.
Jennifer did mention 24 or 32 feet sound barriers. How do you decide?
That's based off of the modeling that the acoustical control does, that Tage did. So that's based off of the model for the frac fleet.
Okay, so that's going to be done then? Or?
No, that's already been done. Yeah, Tage has. I believe, if I remember
Well, I guess
correctly.
my question is, well, which one is it, 24 or 32?
It's both. So we have, I believe at this site on one edge it's 24
I
feet,
see.
and the others it's 32. That's how out. For example, our current Apollo pad in Elizabeth Township, I believe that's a mixture of 32 and 24 feet as well.
Is the availability of these alternate frac fleets a function of lead time? Or?
So it's a function of, how many are under a contract with an EMP operator. And then also lead times do play in it. When one operator finishes it, you have to wait for that one to come across potentially. But, as we mentioned, if, say, they're all under contract at that time, then, obviously wouldn't be able to use it.
Do you know what typically is a lead time on those?
It varies, right, depending on, in the kind of say for the United States, for this one that we have coming down for our Apollo frac, it was available to start for us at the date that we chose. So they weren't like, can you give me 2 weeks? Can you give me 3 weeks? They were there. There's other frac fleets we looked at, they're like, well, we can't get to you till October, so that didn't meet our timeline, so that's why it kind of sways your decision.
6 months, 12 months?
It could be, depending. Sometimes it's 3 weeks, lead time, or just a week. It just varies with supply and demand at that particular time.
Do you have a start date for this? Well,
Roughly for completion activity of the Apollo?
no.
Or for the Titan? No, we do not have a completion start date at this time. We
When
don't
would
have a
that be
location built yet.
If it's approved, when would that be determined?
Well, it would be based off of our plans and our drill schedule, and then our construction schedule is when we would decide when we frack it. But those things have to come first.
More than a year out? More than 2 years out?
It depends. No fine answer on that.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Hamilton?
Hi, Ryan, how are you?
Ms. Hoffman, I'm great. How are you?
Good, thanks.
Well, yeah, our court reporter's been really hanging in there. And I don't want to hold you back. If we have to come back, we have to come back. Can you give us some kind of an idea?
I actually think I can get through questioning Ms. Hoffman relatively quickly. 10 minutes.
Nancy, that's.
I'm happy to
We can pick up the
wait for next
the
time. if
exhibits
that's-
next month, so, okay, again, as much time as you need, if Nancy, just put up your arm and we'll come back, so.
All right, thank you. Ms. Hoffman, you mentioned, I think you mentioned communications with landowners throughout the process. I'm sorry, thank you. You mentioned communications with landowners. Does that include alert mailers to landowners?
So what we do generally is prior to constructing a location, we would send out a postcard to the residents within 3,000 feet, which would be the same distance that would receive our drill permit application information, and allow them to sign up for an alert system.
Okay, and if they elect to sign up for this alert system, how are they contacted?
They can sign up for email or for text messages, I believe, at this point. I don't believe we've got a phone call option.
Okay, and what types of situations warrant an alert?
I don't think we've had to deploy it yet.
What would the plan be?
If we would have an incident at our location, part of our emergency response plan would encompass making sure our residents know if there's a well control incident, for example.
You mentioned noise monitors at the Poseidon site?
Yes.
Those are continuous noise monitors?
They're continuous during, so we generally put them out during construction, drilling, completion, and then remove them during production.
Okay. And are you also utilizing similar noise monitoring at the Gaia and Metis site in Penn Township?
So we had them out, so we have not started constructing Metis yet. We had them out during construction of Gaia. We've also had them out at our Zeus location, our Apollo location, and our Plutus location.
And in Penn Township, was continuous noise monitoring a condition of approval?
Yes, it is, in Penn Township.
Was continuous air monitoring also a condition of approval there?
Yeah, Penn Township's a little bit of an odd bird because they had a consent order agreement that they entered into HHEX and have decided to basically blanket every well pad with the same conditions, and then add additional ones.
And did you also conduct baseline air monitoring at those locations?
No, I don't recall off the top of my head.
You don't recall whether that was a condition of approval?
I don't recall. I've got a lot of projects, Ryan.
I have to object to this. This goes beyond any discussion of the complaint process.
Actually, we had a council member that opened that up a bit. We're open to arguments, are you presenting, proposed conditions, but, I've taken the position pretty clearly, and there's no similar consent order agreement, that we're not gonna really get into air quality, so you could just limit it. I don't know how far you're gonna go, but
Yeah, so,
I'm gonna go much further.
thank you, Mr. Sadig. I think my interest relates to the council member's question about air monitoring that was conducted at an extensive, that air quality data that was collected from DEP Air Monitoring Network, as Ms. Hoffman testified to, that was collected from a significant distance from the site. And I'd like to present Ms. Hoffman with a copy of the Gaia site proposed finding, or the actual findings, conclusions of law and conditions.
You can present it to us. That's a public record, so she doesn't need to testify.
I'm sure I have a copy of it as well.
Okay. Well, I can provide a copy to the council then, and we'll move on. Ms. Hoffman, you mentioned at the Apollo site in Elizabeth Township. My recollection of that site was a proposed electric frac fleet, but you're saying it's not the electric frac fleet that's being used there?
We've always talked about the want to use an electric frac fleet, but because of availability, we have not been able to commit to that. We do have a diesel sound attenuated fleet that we're planning to use for our upcoming frac.
And that's what would be used at the Apollo site?
That is what's proposed to use at the Apollo site.
Was the reason for using that to meet the standards, the noise standards in the Elizabeth Township ordinance?
I honestly, I would be speculating. I'm not sure why operations chose that fleet over something else.
Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Hamilton, other than we're going to start with just putting some exhibits in, it'll be your turn. Or do you anticipate having enough witnesses to take the evening? It's again just to notify the public as to whether they might comment.
I believe our witnesses would most likely take the majority of the evening at the next hearing. We may run a little bit longer and have to go into the following hearing.
Okay, so we're not going to have public comment either next. You're going to use the whole time till 10 o'clock.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
All right. With that, unless there's anything else, the next meeting is it the
7th,
it's 7 o'clock?
August 7th, 7 p.m. So are we in agreement to keep the public hearing open and continue this until August 7th?
Yes. Yes.
So let it be written, so let it be done.
Want to adjourn?
Need one more motion to adjourn the meeting for this evening.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The meeting is adjourned at 10:07 p.m.